Yesterday I went to my cousin's son's birthday party. It was Star Wars themed. A couple of weeks ago, my cousin and her family came over to my house for my son's birthday party. It was Star Wars themed. Because my family has entered into a period where fathers are creating sons in their own image. We love Star Wars, so we're making our kids love Star Wars. Case in point as to how this is working. We got Patrick and Evan a fish tank and all the stuff to go into the fish tank and a fish for Christmas. And we went to the pet store and we bought a boy fish. And the boy fish was named Luke. That fish lasted a day. So we went back the next day and got a new fish. That fish was a boy fish, and that boy fish was named Luke. That fish has lasted about 6 weeks. So we've now gone to the pet store a third time, and this time we got a girl fish, and the girl fish is named Leia. I had no part in naming any of these fish, or in caring for them apparently. Star Wars is a story that begins in the middle. The first movie to come out was Episode 4, which means that right from the beginning it's telling you you're about to be dropped into the middle of something. You're told about a galactic empire and a rebellion and stolen plans and something sinister called the Death Star. Immediately you see this princess putting something into a trash can robot, and you see a man in black armor with a cape and a laser sword. This is a fully developed world with fully developed characters, and you have just, forgive the cross-universe pun, beamed down into it. Last week we beamed down into a story right in the middle. It's the foundational story of the Old Testament, the foundational story of the people Israel. Everything else in the Old Testament depends on this one particular story. And since Jesus was born, since God decided to become human, incarnate within a human being born into the people Israel, this story is a foundational context for our understanding of what it is that God is doing in Jesus Christ. And that story is the Exodus story, where God hears the cry of the people Israel enslaved in Egypt and delivers them from bondage with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Last week, Pastor Mario preached about one of the definitive points in this story. If this story were a multi-season Netflix show, Mario preached on the moment that would serve as the season 1 finale. When God parts the Red Sea, and there are walls of water to the right and the left, and yet the children of Israel walk across dry land. Pharaoh's army pursues them and are drowned when the waters become unparted. And Pastor Mario told us that as we embark upon our own personal Lenten journey, and as we as a church embark upon this new vision to be a multi-ethnic, multi-generational church, there was one phrase that God had for us. And it was the same phrase that God had for Israel. Go forward. Well, today we are going to flash backward, because we picked up the story in the middle. And we should talk about who Moses was and how he came to be the person that stood upon the banks of the Red Sea and raised his arms over the water. And I really hope that this sermon will prove to be better than the Star Wars prequels. So let's flash backwards, way backwards, to generations before Moses was born. Joseph of the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat variety has this amazing God story that sees him overseeing the administration of food reserves during a famine. His family, who had sold him into slavery, initiating this amazing God story, comes to Egypt because they have no food in their land. And it comes to pass that Joseph is reunited to his family, forgives his brothers, and the children of Israel make their home in Egypt. And as time goes by, 2 important things happen. The first is that the Egyptians subjugate the Israelites and force them to be their slaves. The second is that the Israelites have babies. Lots of them. Like lots and lots and lots of them. Until one day Pharaoh wakes up and realizes that the Israelite slaves outnumber the Egyptians by so many that it would be easy for the Israelites to revolt and overthrow Egypt. So he orders that male Israelite children be killed in order to control the population. But there's one Israelite woman who gives birth to a son and has enough faith and moxie and determination to not see her child die, that she raises the child in secret and then sends the child down the river rather than see him killed, where he is discovered by Pharaoh's daughter. and raised as Pharaoh's grandchild. This child is young Moses. Moses grows up and realizes that he is an Israelite, living in Pharaoh's house, the same Pharaoh who is systematically oppressing and abusing Moses' people. One day Moses goes to where the Israelites are working as slaves, and he observes the trials and struggles of his people. He sees an Egyptian beating an Israelite and becomes enraged. And in his rage, he kills the Egyptian. Knowing that if found, he will be executed, he runs away to Midian. In Midian, he meets a nice young woman, marries her, settles down, goes to work for his father-in-law, and has some kids. So Moses has had a crazy life already and then wants to settle down and have a normal life. And for a while he is. For a while he does. He goes to work, he's raising a family, he's paying his taxes, probably. He's like us. And you know what he wants more than anything else in the world? To live a normal, comfortable life. Which means he's just like us. So what happens that takes Moses from living a regular, normal life to someone who is raising his hands over the Red Sea while Pharaoh's army approaches? This story. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land, and into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. This is the famous burning bush experience. Moses sees this bush that is on fire but not being consumed and hears God's voice calling out from the bush. Go back to Egypt, God says, because I have heard the cry of my people and I am coming to their rescue, and I have chosen you to lead them out of slavery and into freedom. So much for wanting to live a normal, comfortable life. What takes Moses from this normal, comfortable life to standing at the edge of the Red Sea? It's this story. It's this moment. It's this call from God. And here's what I want to say to you today. God has a call for you too. Sorry. God has something he wants you to do. God has uniquely made you to accomplish something in this world. And what's more, God is reaching out to you, telling you what it is. The question is, will you listen? Will you respond? It was about 6 weeks ago that a number of our leadership were at a bi-district training day conference listening to Reverend Dr. Rodrigo Cruz, who is currently the pastor of Net Church in Atlanta. Net Church is a multi-ethnic, multi-site church plant. And he was telling us his story. He was the associate pastor of another church in Atlanta where they had a Spanish language service as well as a contemporary English service every week. And every week he would alternate preaching in one of those services. He said that one morning, as he was preparing to go to church, his young son asked him, Daddy, are we going to the white church today or to the Hispanic church? He said in that moment, God spoke to him. He had a burning bush moment. He saw that their model for worship was forcing his half-white, half-Latino son to choose between different parts of his identity. And Reverend Cruz said in that moment he knew he needed to move to a different church. He needed a church where his children wouldn't have to choose between different parts of their identity, but could worship as whole people before the God who made them just as they are. And in that moment, I had a burning bush type moment about spirit life. In that moment, I heard God speaking to me saying that the choice we've been asking people to make as they walked up the ramp to Forest Park High School and into the cafeteria, a choice to go right for a bilingual service or left for an English service, was not a choice that we're going to be asked to make in the kingdom of God. It's not a choice we're going to be asked to make in heaven. So why are we asking people to make it now? And I think God has been speaking to the rest of our leadership in that same way. And I think God has been speaking to a number of you who for months have been saying, why can't we meet together? And upon hearing God, we moved. We acted. We're beginning to live into what we believe God is calling us to do. What is God calling you to do? What ministry in the church? What ministry in the community? What is God asking you to do? But here's what I find really interesting about this story. I bet there are many of us that feel like we might feel God asking us to do something, asking us to move outside our comfort zone, asking us to leave behind a comfortable life and do something we hear God saying, I made you to do this. Something we hear, and said, if only God would speak to us clearly. If only God would speak to us directly. If only I had a burning bush, I would go, I would move, I would do what God was asking me to do. I remember when I was answering my call to ministry and people would ask for my call story, I'd say something like, I never got a burning bush, but, ... I serve on a general church committee that hears people's call stories, and often I hear, I never got a burning bush, but. The assumption is that if we did get a burning bush, it would be so easy to follow God. But let's take a look at what happened to the person who did get the burning bush. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Moses makes an excuse for why he shouldn't go. But here's what's more. Moses doesn't just make that one excuse. Moses spends the next 15 minutes making any excuse he can think of to not answer God, to not respond to God. The first one, who am I? God, you got it wrong. It shouldn't be me. God says, don't worry. I'll be with you. Moses moves to a second excuse. What if they ask me for your name? I.e., what are other people going to think of me? God gives Moses a name and says, I will be with you. Then we get the third excuse. What if they don't believe me? What if they don't pay attention? And God says, if you need to, throw your staff on the ground, it'll become a snake, and when you pick it up, it'll be a staff again, then they'll believe you. I'll be with you. And we get the fourth excuse. I can't speak well. How can I be the mouthpiece of God when I have a stutter? Moses offers a technical excuse. And God says, I'll give you the help you need. I'll be with you. Then we get the fifth excuse. God just sends someone else. Literally, it's in the Bible. God sends someone else. Just don't call on me. So Moses gets a burning bush. He gets this transcendent experience and immediately comes up with 5 excuses, culminating in Moses saying, just choose someone else. Moses is focused on all the reasons why he shouldn't do what God is calling him to do. And here's what's truly crazy. God couldn't have picked a more perfect person for the job. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house. He knew the ins and outs of the Egyptian bureaucracy. He knew how Pharaoh thought. He knew the customs of court. He could walk into the presence of Pharaoh and not be intimidated. And yet he also saw the injustice of Israelite slavery. He knew what he was fighting against and what he was fighting for. It affected him on a visceral level. He was driven to literal murderous rage by this oppression. There was never a more perfect person to accept God's call to deliver the Israelites from slavery and into freedom. But Moses isn't thinking about that. He's telling God the 5 reasons why he might not be the right person for the job, instead of seeing the incredible ways in which he is the right person for the job. God is calling you out of your comfort zone and into something scary and amazing. Maybe it's to lead a small group. Maybe it's to head up a service or a mercy ministry. Maybe it's to increase your giving. Maybe it's to start doing some intentional neighboring and try to disciple people in your neighborhood. Maybe it's to invite some friends to church. God is calling you to something. God has created you for a reason, for a purpose. And God isn't going to be shy about making that next step known. If you're honest with yourself, on a deep gut level, I bet you know what it is. But you're scared. You don't want to do it. You're thinking about all the reasons why you can't do it, why you're the wrong person. And on some level, it comes down to Moses' final excuse. Why can't God just send someone else? Why does it have to be me? But here's the thing. God could not have chosen someone better. If God chose you, it's because you are the exact right person for the job. Which means if God is calling you to something, I have only one piece of advice for you. Go for it. Do it. And when all the excuses come up, remember the answer God gave Moses, I will make a way. And when the fear comes up, remember the answer God gave Moses, I will be with you. As a church, we are embarking upon something hard and something scary. And we do it carrying two promises, that God will make a way and that God will be with us. As you look into what God is calling you to do, remember to carry with you those two promises. God will make a way and God will be with you. Because that is how God leads us, that is how God changes us, that is how God leads us into the life that God created us to live. Amen.
Amen.